In case you haven't heard, Marvel Now is right around the corner, but what does that mean for some existing books when Marvel's going to have the shelves pretty overstuffed? Could some cancellations be in order? Let's take a look. What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. What I want to do is kind of follow up to my last Marvel Now 2.0 video and go into a little bit more depth as to what's going to be sticking around for comics that are currently out and what's going to be kind of getting dropped by the wayside. So, unfortunately, what we run into is that there's production numbers. There are things that publishers like Marvel really need to abide by. If the audience is relatively small for a book, it might not make sense financially to continue publishing it. So they're going to run out the length of a contract, so you typically renew every 5 or 6 issues for different story arcs. So typically what you see is books cancel around either issue 5 or 6, or issue 10, 11, or 12, depending on the length of the arc that they were originally contracted for. So Marvel keeps these books, or DC keeps them on a relatively short leash, unless you're talking about a AAA title like Amazing Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Iron Man, those kind of things, because they tend to pull in the bigger numbers. If we're going to start off this list, we're going to start off with one of the lowest production books, which is already canceled for September, let alone October and November, and that's Hyperion. So Hyperion ends at issue number 6, and the production of that book was down below 10,000 for probably at least July, and it doesn't have a lot of legs moving forward, so that book is unfortunately off the slate. Then we go to Drax. So Drax is still going to be published in September. However, it is going to actually be canceled and off the solicitations for October. So Drax, another one down the drain. So then we get into Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, another book that's right on that cusp of about 10,000 books per month, and it looks like they're going to continue on with that story. And they're setting her up to be the most intelligent person in the Marvel Universe, like smarter than Reed Richards, and that's really going to be interesting because she's a 4th grader, and her biggest task is the science fair. So I'm really interested to see how they integrate her into a larger part of the Marvel Universe to try and make people more aware. But ultimately, she's in September, she's in October, and she's in November. So, that gets her up to about issue 13 before you have any real concerns about Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur going by the wayside. After that, we get into books like Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat, Nighthawk, and then Guardians of Infinity, which all kind of hover around that 13,000, 14,000 mark, which is very similar to things like Black Science, Lazarus, and, the My Little Pony book from IDW. So those are very similar independent titles, which are considered very successful at that same level, but because the publisher of Marvel is so big, they might not see it that way. What we see is that Patsy Walker Hellcat, she survived September, October, and November, so going into the December run, we know that she's going to at least get to issue 13. However, Nighthawk gets issue 5 coming out next month, and issue 6, which really kind of ends him in October, and he's not on the November solicits, so David Walker's Nighthawk is just not going to make the cut, unfortunately. Also, Guardians of Infinity, that's a book that's already cut at September, so that's not a book that's going to be going forward anytime soon. Once we move up a little bit in production numbers, then we get to see titles like Web Warriors, Mockingbird, Contest of Champions, Venom Space Knight, and Howard the Duck. So Web Warriors doesn't make it past September, so that's going to be canceled around October, or at least it's going to stop going into production. Mockingbird's going to continue on through September and October, but doesn't look like she's going to make it in November. However, that could be a hiatus. There are some books that get 1-month delays, depending on how the story is going to be restructuring. Contest of Champions, that's out in September, so that book is donezo. As of right now, Venom Space Knight continues September and October before it gets renamed in November, so the Space Knight portion of Venom, that's going to kind of go by the wayside, and then they're going to retitle it for Venom number 1. So that's one of the things that we went over in Marvel Now 2.0. Lastly, Howard the Duck. Howard the Duck looks like he's going to have his last hurrah in September because he is not on the October or November solicits. So unless he comes back in another capacity, it looks like he's quacked his last. Now we get into the 16,000 to 17,000 range, which is very similar to books like East of West, Spawn, the TMNT Ongoing series, and those books are much more successful in their independent counterparts compared to where we are in a major publisher. So, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it looks like they're going to maybe make it another 1 or 2 issues, but be done by November. Scarlet Witch, however, is going to continue on and is available through the November solicitations. So despite being around the 16,000 mark, definitely looks like she's still going strong. Nova, the Nova book that we know, the young Nova, it looks like he's going to get pushed into the Champions book and no longer be available after September. And then All New Inhumans is another book that is definitely on the chopping block and not necessarily making the cut. Once we get up to and around the 20,000 mark, we get books like Rocket Raccoon and Groot, Spidey, Silver Surfer, and Astonishing Ant-Man. So Rocket Raccoon and Groot, that book is unfortunately not going to make it through till September. Looks like it's going to be canceled somewhere around the October time frame, and we're going to see the introduction of the Rocket Raccoon standalone book as well as the Star-Lord and Gamora. So that makes more sense because they're just going to transition that book into a more solo adventure for him. Spidey is a seminal work. It is an introductory piece for younger readers, so that book continues the entire way. Silver Surfer, written by Dan Slott, he is the main author on Amazing Spider-Man, so despite a 1-month hiatus, that book is going to continue on into November without any real hesitations. And then we get to the Astonishing Ant-Man. So Astonishing Ant-Man is an unfortunate kind of casualty of this, as he's going to make it through September, he's going to make it through October, and then there's no sign of him in November, so are we going to see some sort of reboot in December? Are we going to, basically forego the Ant-Man title? Because I don't see the Ant-Man title going anywhere because they still have to have some sort of presence for the upcoming Marvel movie. Ant-Man and the Wasp might be a few years away, but it is still a property that they're going to want to entice people to come out and get to publishing, because if they don't have a book, they lose some of their story-driven, content for those future franchises. They lose the marketability of the character in the eyes of comic book fans. So I'm kind of up on the fence about what's going to happen with Ant-Man, but I'm not up on the fence about what's going to happen with Vision, because Vision is not going to make it to November, but that's for a very good reason. When Tom King originally put out this series, it was designed to be 12 parts, and we are currently 2 parts away from the end. So after issue 12, there's no new author for issue 13. It's just going to be a one-and-done maxi series, 12-issue type story, and I'm totally fine with that because it's probably one of the best books that's being written out there, and I'm okay with it ending however he wants to do it. Once we get past the Vision, we get to other books, and I'm going to have to read off a list here because there's a few of them. So we've got Spider-Woman, we've got Carnage, we've got X-Men 92, we've got Silk, we've got Squadron Supreme, there's also Captain Marvel, A-Force, Black Widow, and this is kind of concerning because overall, those books are all pretty much in a renewed kind of state. There's a 1-month delay, so there's no Black Widow in September, but it's continuing in October and November. Captain Marvel, they have what looks to be a delay in November. As they're starting up this new series, it might ramp up and launch in December instead. You never really know about that as they continue the current storyline and kind of bring it to a head. Then you've got Squadron Supreme, which is continuing on because they're introducing, they're basically bringing Namor back from the dead for that. Silk is, diversity in the Spider-Man character verse, so that's not a big deal. X-Men 92 lives on in nostalgia, so it's got a core fan base. It might not be the best book, but it is definitely a book worth reading for people that enjoy that. And Carnage is continuing with Jerry Conway, who's proving that he can write a competent book and is taking over a flagship-style title in Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows. So I'm not sure how long it's going to last, but definitely something that if he can continue to develop that Carnage character independently, it could be a book that sticks around and stay around that 22,000 per month kind of series mark, where it's been pretty consistent for the last few months. The big thing is A-Force. So A-Force is a book about, according to July, it was about 24,000 units, and it's pretty much the dominant all-female superhero team in Marvel. And overall, a lot of people really enjoy that book. However, there's a big old question mark sometime around November. So the question is A-Force going to go by the wayside, or is it going to get this kind of restructuring? Is it going to get this different jumping off point? Once you get on or above 25,000 books, then you're in the neighborhood of DC's Future Quest and Scooby Apocalypse, which are currently their lowest selling non-reprint books out there right now. So I've already gone through a list of, almost 30 books that are selling from Marvel that are continuing series, some of them continuing on, some that aren't, that are below that threshold. And the big thing that I worry about with this possible hiatus, possible cancellation of A-Force is that they eliminate essentially what is a strong female team presence, which is very underserved in every kind of genre, every kind of book from every publisher, save for a few from like independent titles that are really catering to that specifics. I mean, you've got a book that's got Captain Marvel, She-Hulk, and a number of other different characters that are really driving the powerful female cause in that respect. So I'd hate to see it kind of not continue on in its current iteration, and I really hope that it's something that sticks around and that this is just a delay as they can kind of figure out a new path or, a good way to continue that particular storyline. So what it comes down to is my biggest issue with these kind of restructurings and changes inside Marvel or DC is execution and what it means for those particular titles. If we're talking about DC's rebirth, we saw a change-up of creative teams, we saw a change-up of titles, we saw renumbering schemes, and then, whole new launches of all new books. But the one constant is that they are focused primarily on telling a very good story. So a lot of these books that are coming out from Marvel, I want to make sure that they are going to contain the best of intentions story-wise. They're going to be very character-driven, and they're going to create compelling arcs so that people can read along with them, because that's the most entertaining thing. I don't want to see flashy stuff. I want to be invested in these characters. So Marvel Now 2.0 is going to have to stand the test of time when it comes to character, plot development, and future arcs. And right now, there are a couple books that I've got on my pull list because I want them. There are a couple books that I've got out of habit. And really what it comes down to is I'm a little bit more hesitant to kind of give new books a try, simply because I'm going to be honest, the current Civil War II tie-in, the main event book, it's just unflattering to, several characters. It feels like it's relatively shoehorned into the universe. And if they are looking at what an event does and how it works, and then they're going to restructure completely after that, it's like, what kind of aftermath are we looking at that has caused such a drastic change in the Marvel landscape? So those are my fears. However, we're not going to see really the results of those until we start seeing books rolling out late September, October, November, December, and how it goes from there. I just went over a list, and there's 13, 14 books that aren't necessarily going to make the cut for, November. So I hope what's replacing them is going to be able to slot in a little bit higher on the sales charts for Marvel's sake, and that the stories are going to be compelling enough so that way they can capture some of the readers that DC has clearly been taking from them with the Rebirth titles. So that's my rundown on the cancellations and continuations as of Marvel Now 2.0, at least in the solicitations. So if you guys want to start a conversation, start a dialogue, ask some questions, hit me up in the comments down below. As always, if you like what you see, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book TV shows, comic book games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.